Susannah, tell me, when did you first come across magic?
So my parents were super into that, 70s and 80s, a sort of occult renaissance.
Oh, right.
So they were both raised Jewish, and were very proud of their Jewish heritage and spirituality all throughout their lives. But they were also very drawn to, Gardnerian Wicca,
All right.
and that sort of that eclectic neo-paganism that we still see echoes of today.
Yeah.
So I was always raised going to witchy shops, and my mom always had tarot decks when I was growing up. So it was just sort of the environment I grew up in.
Right. So was there any kind of an idea then that you would come on and be an accountant or something very conservative and just kind of leave all that behind?
Well,
the big punk rebellion is to, become like an economist or something.
Right. No, my mom always said that the biggest rebellion I could do was to become, what did she call it? She called it a red blazer Republican.
Oh, right. Okay.
Like those Republican women commentators who always have like the very blonde hair and the very, and I, for the most part, I was into what my parents were doing. I was like a very hard polytheist as a kid.
Okay.
I'm very into the Roman and Greek pantheons. But when I was, I want to say 17, I remember doing a working, and I'm like, this is the last working I'm going to do.
Oh, okay.
So that was sort of my rebellion. I didn't go full conservative.
Yeah.
But I definitely put aside a lot of the witchy stuff for a few years.
And what was if that was your last working, I suppose, at that time, what were you doing up to then? Like, was it were you doing stuff as part of a community? Were you doing solitary stuff, family stuff, or what was going on?
It was mostly solitary and family. My family would do spells and invocations together. And then I would do my own. The last thing I did when I was a teenager was, it was around Halloween, and I was asking for protection for friends,
Yeah.
Teenager stuff.
Yeah. And what was the actual belief though at that point? Were you we see you were into the different pantheons and stuff? Were they as archetypes, as kind of ideas, or actual deities, actual, entities, or what was your kind of worldview, I suppose?
By the time I was a teenager, it was definitely more of an archetype kind of thing. I didn't know that chaos magic was a thing, okay. But as soon as I found chaos magic a few years ago, I was like, oh, this is what I've been doing forever. Cool.
Yeah.
But no, when I was a child, it was very much belief in deities and the actual existence of these deities. The Abrahamic God never made a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
But there's, the sense of the Abrahamic, God, sky daddy in the sky kind of thing. That's not even really a Jewish belief anyway.
Okay, yeah.
So that's part of why that never really made sense. But no, by the time I was a teenager, and to this day, it's definitely more of an archetypal thing. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Very agnostic about the whole thing.
Well, you should be. Yeah. The only thing I suppose my thing about agnostic is that, we sort of see it as the word of we don't know, but it's the word is agnostic as in without knowledge, but there's kind of an implication in there that there is knowledge, but you just don't have it. So it's
right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
But I haven't found anything, or I found very little compelling enough for me to think. But I have had some experiences that make me pause and wonder.
Could you share some?
Yeah. So, not to get too dark, but a few years ago, my father was killed.
Okay.
And my husband and I were cleaning out his apartment. And we didn't have a lot of time to do it. And I was cleaning it out, and there were cats. My father had 4 cats and a dog. And in the couple of days after he passed, we got out 3 of the cats and the dog, and they were all safe. And one of the cats we just couldn't find. And I was in a room in the apartment that really hadn't been touched or open. The door had been closed the whole time. And I was going through my mother's belongings, and my parents were a bit of hoarders. So they just had stuff everywhere. And I was going through these boxes, like baby wipes tubs, those plastic tubs where my mom had things stored. Yeah. And I came across a statue of Oya, one of the Orishas. Who guards storms, and she's this very warrior kind of archetype. And any of the religious statues and paraphernalia I found, I put aside. I threw out a lot of junk, but anything religious I put aside, even if it was something that I knew I'd be giving away.
Yeah.
I gave away a lot of the Christian imagery my mom had, because my mom loved the Virgin Mary archetype. So I gave all that away. I gave away a fair few Kuan Yins because my mom was a big Kuan Yin devotee. I have a big tattoo.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. I got in honor of my mom when she passed. So I set aside this Oya statue, and a couple minutes later, it's actually the cat coming up to me now.
Hello, cat.
I'm setting, I set this aside, and I pick something else up out of a box, and it falls behind the dresser. And I reach behind the dresser, and there's a cat.
Right.
And I was like, what is going on? And, my husband and I got her out, and she was fine, even though she hadn't had any access to any of the food or water we'd been putting out for the last 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And
did the cat look bad, or was?
And she looked terrified, but other than that, she was 12 pounds, so she was like 5 kilograms.
Yeah. Well, it's not like, that's still okay. Like, it's not.
That's a normal cat size. Now she's a chunk.
Yeah.
She's a chunky girl. She was absolutely fine, and I talked to a few friends who do work in those African diaspora religions, in the ADRs, and they're like, no, that seems like Oya looking out for you.
Oh, right.
But that's not a path that I tread, because it's not mine.
Okay.
In no matter how eclectic I can be, I really try to respect those religions and those traditions that are exclusionary to outsiders.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, like that whole kind of thing when you have like chaos magic, which is to kind of, in a sense, do as you please in many ways, like, but and then to kind of come across something that, as you say, isn't, it like kind of explicitly says, yeah, this isn't for outsiders at all, and then trying to kind of, I suppose, in a sense, steal something from that while still being respectful. And I kind of like the idea of, I think it's Gordon White who said that it's cool to kind of deal with any of this stuff apart from that you would need to be an actual ordained priest to do the stuff. And then once you get into that kind of level, then stay away. I think that's fair enough,
Right. Like Botanicas sell items to the public.
Yeah.
If you can easily buy it at a Botanica, there's some leeway there. But if you're going around and doing things that usually require a much higher level of initiation, a much higher level of understanding, unless you really, really, really feel chosen and you pursue all the proper avenues, there's just things that don't belong to everyone. And I don't think that's a problem. I know a lot of coyotes bristle at that.
Yeah. And I suppose it's the kind of thing where it just, I suppose it goes against a lot of the kind of chaos magic approach in a sense. But I mean, life experience would teach you that not everything is for you. There's like so much that's not open to, like, even, I don't know if you've ever tried any of the randonauting stuff, which is just going to random places a computer decides for you. But what I found with it, it's just seeing just how much of the planet is closed to me.
Right.
There's private property, houses, buildings, just going like 90% of the planet, more probably, I'm not allowed near. So why wouldn't a spiritual landscape be something similar? Like?
Totally agree. Yeah, I think the Randonaut thing reminded me of Stumble Upon. I don't know if you remember the Stumble Upon extension.
Oh, I do indeed.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did a lot of that. So another thing that I think might fit well into this conversation, my introduction to Discordianism.
Oh, right. Cool.
So when I was a teenager, my parents and I fell on some hard times, and I was staying in a friend of a friend's house. I was watching their many animals, including a tortoise who lived outside.
Okay.
It was a huge tortoise. It was massive. And I was using their computer, and I was on AOL Instant Messenger, as you do, in the mid-2000s. This was, I want to say this was 2006.
Okay.
So I was on Instant Messenger, and I was messing around on LiveJournal again, as you did in the mid-2000s. And I got an instant message from, I wish I could remember the exact handle right now, but it had hat in the title. It was like the missing hat.
Right.
And it was, what do you say, old bean? And I was like, hey, who's this? And this conversation was really weird. And whenever we started asking each other who we were, where we were from, we would get these really weird answers, but then we were able to have other conversations that weren't scripted and clearly weren't a bot. So like any good child raised by the internet, I did some digging.
Yeah.
And it turned out this was this really interesting bot created by an offshoot of Discordianism and chaos magic called Project Upstream.
Oh, right. Okay.
And sort of an aside, I talked about this recently in one of the chaos magic group offshoots.
One of the million.
One of the million. I think it's not officially an offshoot, but it has a lot of the people who I got along well with in good old CMG. So we were talking about Discordianism, and I feel like, especially in recent years, especially in some parts of the internet, Discordianism, sort of like what you were saying about this basic of chaos magic being do whatever you want, has sort of gotten diluted and misunderstood. It's not just chaos and anarchy for the sake of it. That would be an heuristic delusion.
Sure. Yeah,
Something that you go into in the Principia Discordia is heuristic delusions and aneuristic delusions.
Okay.
Aneuristic
Aneuristic
delusions would be, this idea that everything is ordered and everything should be ordered, and there's no, chaos is wrong and there's no real chaos and there's an order to everything. But an heuristic delusion is that everything is chaotic and there's no order whatsoever and there's no practical use for order and nothing should be orderly.
Okay.
There's no chaos without order.
Sure.
And there's no order without chaos.
Yeah.
And this is basic duality in a sense.
Sure. No light without dark, all that kind of stuff. No you without me, etc., etc.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I find it interesting how that gets diluted into this sort of, it's sort of joyless chaos. And I always found
joyless is a great word, because that's exactly what I've been trying to point out. It's a joyless chaos. That's it, exactly. Yeah. And a kind of a contempt almost.
Yes.
Which is odd.
Right. Eris, Principia Discordia version of Eris, not historical version of Eris.
Yeah.
Historically, Eris is extremely spiteful. I mean, and she's the goddess of discord.
Yeah.
But in chaos magic terms, Discordia is not. Discordia should be joyful. In my opinion. Anyway.
Fun, at least, like the playful, and I think the kind of what that translates into in many ways is this whole thing of trolling, for the sake of trying. It's like I'm going, right, okay, I understand and all that, but there's a part of me that seems to miss the humor in that. It doesn't seem fun. It feels joyless. It feels contemptuous. It feels like, what's that expression? It's the like crabs in a bucket or something, like, they're all that kind of. It feels that kind of where it's like people kind of it gives them an excuse to be an asshole rather than which is like, again, fine if that's what you want to do, but under the kind of banner of Discordianism, kind of gives you this kind of sense of, well, I can do whatever I want. And he goes, yes, you can, but that's not the point.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a bit in the Principia, and I'm heavily paraphrasing here. Um, it's Malaclypse is calling upon Eris and saying, the world is terrible, and everyone's fighting each other and shooting each other, and there's war and there's famine and there's poverty and there's illness. And she's like, well, does this make you happy? And he says, no. She says, why don't you stop? It's a Discordian parable, but I mean it's true. And instead of remembering that is literally in canon, for I guess some people can just decide to wipe their butts with canon, and that's totally cool.
Yeah.
But sometimes I like to play by the rules. Like when there's tarot decks I have that say that they don't read with reversals, I don't read them with reversals.
Yeah.
And I find that a little bit of structure makes things better. It's why I like tarot as opposed to most oracle decks. Yours a very, very strong exception, the 40 Servants.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
But the healer is going to be my next tattoo after all this is over.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Finally.
Nice. Yeah.
I told myself I would get it after I became a nurse, and especially after being an emergency nurse in a pandemic, it's time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But no, I like tarot decks because they have that structure to them. And human brains are pretty well studied at this point, and there's still a lot of mysteries we don't know. But one thing is that humans like structure. We like stories. And having a little bit of structure, having a little bit of a plot to follow, in my experience, makes things easier. I mean, I've definitely had some great ritual experiences that were extremely off the cuff, no planning, in the moment, and those have been great. But that's when they happen.
Yeah.
And you can't always rely on that. Having some structure, having some parameters really helps. And sigils are such a common thing that we do, right?
Yeah.
And having no structure to your sigil means that you're going to have some wacky things happen. But having a structure to your sigil, you still may have a very roundabout manifestation of what you're doing, but there's still a thread you can follow. And sort of, it sounds like we got really off topic, but again, that's sort of what I feel has gotten lost in so much of this, postmodern interpretation of Discordianism.
Yeah. No, I understand, and it's like I suppose it's that kind of balance then between what chaos magic in a sense represents, which is getting rid of the dogma and getting to the point of the thing that actually works and doing that. But as Jason Miller points out, I'm nearly sure it's Jason Miller. I keep quoting him as it's him who says this. Maybe it isn't. But as Jason Miller says, you should at least try and do the thing correctly once before you make up your own version of it, to see how it actually runs out. So it's like when you follow the rules of, say, like tarot or stuff like that, or whatever the particular deck, as designed, as the system is, you should probably try it at least once to know why you're changing it or to know why you're doing it. It's like the same thing about sigils. Like, can I do this? Can I do that? You can, but you should try and do it classically once so that you at least understand it. And then you can look back and go, well, why didn't work or this did work? At least you have that kind of framework. But people in general don't like taking notes, I've noticed as well in Chaos Magic. So there's that element of why they probably don't like the following rules either. This whole kind of lack of diary keeping.
I haven't been great at keeping a diary myself. I think you are right about Jason Miller. Whether or not he said it precisely that way, right. He goes into that in Elements of Spellcraft.
Is that where it's from? Right.
Yeah, okay. Elements of Spellcrafting. I have like a very small private witchy group on Facebook, and we did that as like a book club book one month.
Oh, right. So. Very cool. Yeah.
Great. It's awesome. Made me very happy. There's a story in that I think a lot more coyotes would do well to listen to. This is Jason Miller's story, not mine. He was following some very particular Eastern ritual and set of things, and it wasn't working. And he had gone vegetarian because I don't think it was Jain, like Jainist, but I think it was sort of related to that.
Okay.
And he'd gone vegetarian, but it still wasn't doing anything. And he realized he was still eating eggs every morning.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that still isn't something that the people that he'd sourced this ritual from would be doing.
Right.
So he stopped eating eggs and had much better results.
Yeah. I think, like, because I suppose what in one sense could be nearly even talking about two different things. I'll tell you what I mean by that. With Jason Miller, when he's working within that particular paradigm, I think the rules are very important, and you should follow the rules as a thing. Whereas when you look at something like, say, I don't know how familiar you are with say Alan Chapman and Advanced Magic for Beginners, where he would kind of have, he definitely has the same respect, but he would do it in a different way, where he would say, well, try something, see what happens. But if it doesn't work, do something else, augment it and do it. And then, it's like an idea, can I have a sigil mean one thing and the next week mean it for another thing? And it's kind of, well, try, see what happens, this kind of thing. So I understand the kind of inventiveness and kind of playfulness of that type of cave magic compared to, say, what Jason Miller is doing, which is what we were pointing at earlier on, that you should, within certain paradigms, it's important to follow the fucking rules, man. Well,
I mean, that's always so. Early on, I avoided chaos magic because I thought it was all ceremonial thelema.
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
I don't know why I conflated them, but I guess because of the Crowley circle jerk that tends to happen.
Sure.
But I just thought they were the same thing. So like I kept getting, Facebook kept telling me, go join CMG. And I'm like, no, I'm not a Thelemite. And then, I did a bit of a Wikipedia, and the Wikipedia entry on chaos magic is surprisingly good.
Is it? I don't know if I've ever read it. Right.
Yeah, it is. See, I like Wikipedia because I like to dig into the sources.
Right. Yes.
That are listed on any Wikipedia page. Like whatever the Wikipedia page says is what it says, but the sources are where you get the real tea. So, something that stuck out is using different paradigms. And as someone who has a background in theater and a background in literature, that is something that always appealed to me because I always loved deconstructing a text through different lenses.
Sure. Yes.
So using that in chaos magic really appealed to me, and it was kind of what I'd already been doing. But Manuel of Keeping Tarot Real. Okay. He was saying recently in one of the little offshoot groups I'm in, the question was, what would you tell a baby magician at this point? And one of his insights was use the scientific method. Like you were saying, keep notes of what's working.
Yeah.
Even if you don't, you should keep formal notes. I don't. That's why I don't often say it to people, because I'm absolute pants at it at this point.
I will also admit that I haven't done it in about a year as well. So I'm a hypocrite too. But I've you can see I've a whole shelf full of them. So I have done it if someone wants to come and actually check. But I won't let you see them either though. So. So yeah, I win all things.
We'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
But no, even if you don't keep detailed notes, although again we all should be, at least having an idea of what worked and what didn't, and what about it. It really depends on how good your memory is, and all of our memories are worse than we think they are.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But, and the thing that you won't remember is probably the key bit.
Right. Having that idea of the scientific method, science it out. Oh, well, will this work? I don't know. Go ahead and give it a shot.
Yeah, I agree. So we've talked about tarot a fair bit, so I think we should pull back just a bit. You did say you were brought up with tarot being around. When did you get full head into heels into your love of tarot then?
So my mom had done tarot and some light astrological readings on and off throughout the years. Sometimes she would do readings to supplement our income, because again, I had a pretty rough and tumble childhood. So, we moved all over the country, and America's a big country, so there's a lot of moving. And, tarot and astrology was something she could do wherever she was. Which is nice. Yeah. I remember very distinctly a reading that she did for me when I was about 9, and she drew the she drew the 9 of Swords, and she looked at the reading and said nope, and packed it up and didn't finish.
Fair enough.
So the 9 of Swords and the Tower are 2 of my very particular cards these days. So I kind of just grew up with it, and then when I want to say I was 13, she got me my first tarot deck, which was Natalie Hertz's Vampire Tarot.
Okay.
It's the one with like the red and black background and the very whimsical, fanciful looking vampire figures.
Okay.
It's
I'm not
still
familiar,
in print.
but
It's still in print. It's very popular in the. I've seen it in almost every, new age shop that I've gone into in the last 10 years.
All right, then I probably have seen it then.
You absolutely have at some point. And I've certainly posted it.
All right,
so
okay.
There's a fair chance you've seen it around. It's a decent deck. The Major Arcana is absolutely stunning. Has one of my favorite representations of the moon. I love the court cards, but the Minor Arcana leaves something to be desired. So for years, I was a majors only reader.
Oh, okay.
Which has its pros and cons. I'm very much a fan of the Minor Arcana at this point. I think they add untold depths of nuance to a reading, but I will say that the Major Arcana and doing a majors only reading poses its own challenges when you're getting these cards with this big energy and these big meanings and applying them to smaller things, to smaller, more mundane, everyday things. That requires a fair bit of understanding of the cards and of nuance that I do think really did help set me up well later on. But that's sort of, jumping in head first.
Right.
So I kind of, just did readings for myself and my friends for many years. And as I mentioned, so I got them when I was 13. When I was about 17, I stopped doing most magical workings and most witchy things, but I always kind of kept around a set of tarot cards. I do think that they are very practical, even if you remove the spiritual trappings and the spiritual meanings from tarot. I still think that they're a very useful way to interpret the world and life and your thoughts. As I said, humans thrive on storytelling.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're a storytelling medium. So you can look at them completely devoid of the numerological, astrological significance and take that step back. Not that I think it's a bad thing to add it back in either.
Sure. Yeah.
But part of why tarot has appealed to me over the years is that it has so many layers, and you can connect with it sort of wherever you're at. So I kept around a deck. I think I had like one of those mini Hanson Roberts decks that you can get at bookstores, in those little tarot for beginners kits.
Yes. Yeah.
And I want to say when I was around 20, 21, maybe around 20, maybe it was even younger. It was around when I moved out of my parents' house. And I did that when I was 19. I picked up another Vampire Tarot. And, I just kind of kept noodling around with it. I would pull them out every once in a while. I would do readings for a couple of my friends for their birthdays. And then when I was 23-ish, I decided I wanted to take it a little more seriously. Started to try to keep a journal, failed a lot. My mom passed away when I was 25.
Okay.
And I'd already been trying to take tarot a little bit more seriously at that point. I'd been doing more readings. I'd been a little bit more on top of it. And when she passed away, my father gave me all of her decks.
Oh, right. Okay.
So there were a lot.
Actually, many. Was there lots, or was it like handful, or?
It was a handful. It was a large handful.
Yeah. Okay.
I gave away several of them immediately. They just didn't. Well, not quite immediately. First, I had to let them sit on the fire escape for a while because they reeked of cigarettes.
All right. Okay.
Reeked. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to have to throw out all these tarot decks, but they really stank.
Right.
And I used to be a pack and a half a day cigarette smoker. Like I know cigarette smell, but this was years of chain smoking baked in.
All right.
But no, I managed to get the smell out of them. I was very happy about it. So I gave away a few decks instantly. There was I think there was an Aquarian deck I probably gave away that I kind of regret. There was some really, really terrible King Arthur deck. I just instantly hated. I love King Arthur, but I instantly hated this deck, and I gave it away to someone who made great use of it. So I'm very happy about that. I'm sure there were a few others that I instantly gave away, but there was a Shadowscapes deck that's very popular. That purple one.
Oh yes, I think I know that one. Yeah.
Witch Ham often reads with it.
Right. Okay.
My husband convinced me to keep that one. I wanted to give that one away, and he said, no, I think you should keep it. So I did. And then there was a Centennial Smithwaite. So of all the variations of Rider-Waite decks that there are, my favorite is the Centennial Smithwaite.
Okay.
It is recolored more towards the colors that Pamela Coleman Smith envisioned for the deck, instead of those very garish hues that we're used to seeing in the very common reprints.
Sure. Yeah.
Of the Rider-Waite. And the Rider-Waite deck is one that I think sort of gets a bad rap. As we were kind of saying about chaos magicians, a lot of coyotes sort of discard tradition.
Right. Yeah.
Out of hand, which is not useful. We should be taking what we can take from tradition, not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Indeed. Yeah. And you think that's what they're doing with the deck, is that, that's, everyone has that deck, therefore it's rubbish kind of thing. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think they should be turning that sort of energy on the Thoth deck, but that's neither here nor there. I like the Thoth deck. I'm not primarily a Thoth reader, but I think it's
I like the Thoth deck, but I just sometimes just want to go, will you stop being so bloody negative, will you, please?
Right, and it's also just it's so common in our circles.
It is,
and it's like if you're going to lambast the Rider-Waite for being overblown, well, physician, heal thyself. But snark aside, the Centennial Smithwaite really spoke to me, and it was the first Rider-Waite deck to do that. And I also found at the same time there is a UK site called Little Red Tarot.
Okay.
That I think is now defunct. It's not, it's still online, but it's not putting out anything new, which is a shame because it's a great resource for modern and diverse tarot, especially LGBTQ resources, resources for people of color, and
I'll put that link in the show notes for people.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth a gander. And there is an alternative tarot course that I picked up. This is now 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago that I picked up this course. It's significantly more expensive now. I don't know that I would personally buy it at the new price. Okay. Not that I don't think it's worth it, just that
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't spend that money. Yeah.
I don't know that I would, but I would certainly get a look at it because it's a self-paced PDF-based course.
Right.
That involves journaling and specific spreads to get more comfortable. It invites you to, and the nice thing about it is that once you buy it, you have the PDFs forever.
Right. Yeah.
You also have, I think the new version, the more expensive version, there's access to a forum of people who are using it. I think that was actually an option before. And that tarot course really unlocked it for me. And it's not something that I don't think that you can do without it.
Right.
But for whatever reason, I always thrive on having a little bit of guidance in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I definitely admire people who can be completely autodidactic and teach themselves everything off of a YouTube video, but that's not usually my experience. I like to have someone who I can turn to for some validation of my progress, someone I can turn to for their experience, because I think that...
As in like in a personal type relationship type thing, rather than like, is it like you actually have a physical conversation, not necessarily, but a virtual conversation, whatever, with them, or like what's the difference between doing a PDF course and a YouTube video, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Well, I think that the PDF course, I think that some YouTube videos could probably go in depth enough to do it, but this PDF course was really designed to dig down deep.
Right.
And I think I meant that more for craft things. Like I couldn't teach myself to crochet off of a YouTube video. I tried many of them.
Right. Okay.
It didn't click until I went to a local craft store and did a sit-down session with somebody.
Right. I totally understand that. I get that. Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, yeah, for whatever reason, and I think part of why I recommend the Alternative Tarot course so highly is because I was able to grok it without that one-on-one relationship that I normally benefit from so much.
Yeah.
So I did that, and for me, the biggest thing was unlocking the Minor Arcana, and understanding that each Minor Arcana is following the same story, but as expressed within that suit, expressed within that element. So you go from the ace all the way up to the 10, and it's really the same story in each suit. But, in cups, it's a story of relationships, and in wands, it's the sort of the life cycle of an idea.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I like that.
And understanding that was sort of what I needed, because as I mentioned, my first tarot deck, the Minor Arcana, is just not very useful.
Is that from an aesthetic point of view? Is it just like literally 3 wands or 3 pentacles?
Basically. It's a step above a pip deck. So it's not like a Tarot de Marseille pip deck, or even a Thoth deck that's very, sort of esoterically arranged. It's artistic, but not evocative enough to be super useful.
Is it like the BOTA deck? Have you come across that one? The Paul Foster Case one, where the majors are amazing, but the minors are like a very basic kind of, but not quite a Thoth deck, It's probably something similar. Yeah.
It sounds very similar. And it makes sense because years later I was browsing through the little white book that came with it, and the author mentions that she doesn't really use the Minor Arcana.
Funny enough.
And I was like, well, everything makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
The swords are actually okay in that deck, but the wands are just absolutely useless. It's like a picture frame on the wall with wands in it, and then a scene in the foreground that has nothing to do with the meaning of the card. It's no wonder I couldn't wrap my head around it back then. But having the Rider-Waite deck and having that very traditional pictorial symbolism, and again, sort of, talking about wanting to make sure we're not just throwing out tradition for the heck of it. The Rider-Waite deck is so enduringly popular, and it was such a big deal when it first came out, because it was the first deck to have the pictorial, the first mainstream deck, besides the Solabusca. It was the first mainstream deck to have that pictorial symbolism of the Minor Arcana. Yeah. And that is what was able to bring this mainstream understanding and appreciation of the deck into this wider sphere and sort of unlock that for people.
Yeah, and like in a very kind of chaos magic way, allowing it, the great unwashed to also partake in tarot, and by able, you could, just by reading the pictures themselves, you can read someone's fortune.
Right.
Yeah. So what attracts you now? Like, what's your favorite decks now? What is the thing that you look for in a deck? Or
favorite deck is a hard one. Like many people, I've become a bit of a collector. I mean, the Centennial Smith-Waite is probably still my go-to. I use the borderless edition personally. I don't tend to care about borders on my cards, but the borderless edition is really nice. I like that there's sort of a seamlessness to decks that don't have borders on them.
Yeah.
And I kind of just use different decks for different types of readings.
Can you give an example then?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I often do in-person events. And when I do those events, I always bring a Rider-Waite, but I also bring at least one other deck. I usually bring something a little bit more modern, something a little bit more approachable, I guess, because something to be said about the Rider-Waite is that it's very white, it's very straight.
Sure.
Even though Pamela Coleman Smith, was not entirely white, she was biracial, and she was probably not straight, but it was a commissioned piece of art.
Sure.
So she did what she was paid to do with it. So there are definitely decks I have that are favorites, but they're not decks that I read with very often.
Right.
One example of those is the Tarot of the Silicon Dawn by Egypt Ernash.
Okay. I don't know. Not familiar.
Oh, so it's funny. I'm trying to remember. I must have come across that deck probably from the Little Red Tarot website.
Okay.
Because they did a review of it. And it is so queer. The creator is a trans woman who lives in New Orleans now. And is from New Orleans, I think. And I did an interview with her on my podcast last year, which was wonderful. And she does art as well. She does a lot of very chaos magic-y art. Putting in a shameless plug for her, I believe she is Egypt Ernash on Twitter.
Right.
Which is a good place to find her. And this deck it's really cool. It was produced by Los Scarabeo in its first printing. It is out of print now and wildly expensive.
Okay.
But she's looking to do a second printing. She's actually making headway on it. So I'm very excited. It's very small, like it's physically very small. It's almost like a travel size deck, but it's very thick because it has all these extra cards. It has a suit of Void.
Okay.
It has a 99 of each suit.
Oh, very cool. There's
spot gloss on the cards. It is completely wild. It also does something that I don't tend to like in tarot decks. It switches the elemental significance between wands and pentacles.
Oh, people seem to really hate when people do that.
I hate it. I hate it so much. And it works so incredibly well in this deck. I think I hate it because it's not done well a lot of the time.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
It seems like it's sort of done for the heck of it a lot of the time. And in this deck, it works so incredibly well that I can't help but be happy about it. So that's a favorite deck that I don't read with very often because it's really difficult to read with.
Okay.
It has all these extra cards. It has the Void suit. It has that switch. It's just not a deck that I pull out to read with very often. But right now my Etsy is on hiatus because of my job. Again, emergency nursing in a pandemic. But I have a specific listing for it on my Etsy because I love that deck.
What's people's kind of reactions to it? Like, obviously, people enjoy the readings from it. Is there a particular personality to it, like the readings, or?
They're a little bit irreverent.
Okay.
They cut to the chase.
Right.
But something I will say is that while I do take sort of deck style and like deck, I don't know, personality into consideration, for me and the lens through which I view tarot, specifically the lens through which I view my tarot work, it's not the tool that has the power, it's the reader.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I would deliver a very similar reading no matter what deck it is.
Yeah. Do you have a particular deck that you like to read for yourself, or what's your thoughts on doing readings for yourself?
I have no problems with the concept of doing readings for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm just a very harsh critic of myself.
Right.
I don't read for myself very often because I tend to be very doom and gloomy.
Right. Yeah. I have a similar problem.
But I do, if I am doing a reading for myself, I tend to reach for the Centennial Smithwaite, the Vampire Tarot, or weirdly enough, the Wild Unknown. So,
okay. Yeah. So that's another kind of deck that people love and then all of a sudden hate at the same time. It's very odd. It's just the popularity, I assume, of it.
Yeah, I was gonna after I spent all that time babbling about the Silicon Dawn Tarot, I was gonna go into some of the others. So, I tend to do a lot of queer events.
Right.
So 2 decks that I tend to bring to those are Mystic Mondays, and the Wild Unknown. Mystic Mondays is that a lot of my friends call it the Vaporwave deck.
Right.
Like the Vaporwave aesthetic.
Yeah.
All of the cards I think that were typically men are presented as women, except for the Kings. The Kings are super sexy. Like they are daddy as fuck.
Right. Okay.
They are very, very sexy men. So the Mystic Mondays deck is something that my queer and specifically a lot of my non-binary friends really enjoy, because it has that gender play. It sort of has that like blue and pink aesthetic that seems to be very popular. And for whatever reason, the Wild Unknown is another deck that a lot of my queer tarot clients really enjoy.
Right.
I will say I like the Wild Unknown. I also have a complicated relationship with the Wild Unknown, as does I guess a lot of people uncomplicatedly love it. But a lot of us who are, really deep into the tarot thing definitely have these complicated feelings about it.
And just because of the symbology and that kind of stuff of it, or what's the reason?
Well, for me, like I'm very much a city witch.
Okay.
Like I love nature in small doses, and I'm very glad it exists.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I want to protect it, but I also want to stay in the city.
Sure.
Even going camping is a little bit too much for my blood.
Right.
So,
you're no fun.
I'm no fun. No, I would try to go camping, but I also lived in Texas for a while, and the bugs were traumatizing.
Right. So I understand. Yes. Yeah.
I'm a little traumatized by the bugs. I know, like I'm really not. I'm not someone who finds nature to be an exceedingly important part of my work.
Okay.
So for me, the Wild Unknown isn't always a strong choice. The other thing that sort of bothers me on a macro level, not with this deck in particular, it's not this deck's fault, but a lot of options that are given to people who don't see themselves reflected in more traditional decks, like the Hanson Roberts or the Rider-Waite, is, oh, well, you have the Wild Unknown. It's like, so you're telling queer people to go pick up a deck full of animals?
Yes, right. Okay, I understand that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That being said, a lot of people are very organically drawn to it.
Yeah.
And that's not my place to be like, well, you shouldn't like this deck because blah, blah, blah. I thought I wasn't going to like it. I thought I was going to sell it. My brother gave me a copy.
Right.
He bought it for himself. He was at some party and they were doing readings, and he got really motivated to do tarot readings for himself. And then the deck comes in and he's like, all right, that was a silly purchase. I'm never going to do this. But my sister's a tarot card reader. So he gave me a deck, and I was going to sell it. My husband here with the saves, says, no, I think you should use it. And I do like it a surprising amount. The artwork is undeniably gorgeous.
Yeah, has to be said, in fairness. That's it. I like it aesthetically. I can't read with it at all. I'm not drawn to it, but I think it's so pretty. I just want to look at it rather than do anything with it.
I'm fairly adept at reading with it, but it's not a favorite deck to read with.
Right.
I am interested in how her artwork has grown. So last birthday, or 2 birthdays ago, I think, a friend gave me her Animal Spirit Oracle deck.
Right. I've had various emails about that, but I never looked into it. I'm obviously on our list, like, but I haven't actually. Is it nice? Is
Yeah,
it pretty?
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Again, it's so not in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I don't read with oracle decks very often. Um, I don't find it particularly useful. I had to get the spray bottle out for the cat.
So I suppose it's a good time to ask, like, say, non-standard tarot decks. Then, if you're not kind of drawn to the oracle decks, which I understand, for the most part, how do you feel then about the kind of tarot decks that don't conform exactly to tradition? Like, are you okay with that for the most part, or is there certain changes that you can't go with? So
I won't use them for the most part, but
okay.
I'm glad that they exist for people who like them. I will say it is a bit of a pet peeve of mine when a deck is called a tarot deck when it's not a 78 or more card deck.
Yeah.
I think you have to have at least 78 cards, or just be a majors only deck in order to call yourself tarot.
Yeah.
Like calling a 52 card oracle deck a tarot deck grinds my gears. That doesn't mean I think it's going to be a bad deck or useless, but it personally annoys me. But I guess, what do you mean by non-standard?
Well, exactly what you're talking about in that kind of sense, in that something that isn't an actual tarot deck that is like presenting itself as a tarot deck. And like if I said that the 47s was a tarot deck, I mean, it's plainly not, but there is similar type decks that claim. But I suppose things like where you have like a Twin Peaks deck, or you have like, I don't know, any of these kind of teamed decks. How do you feel about that? Yeah.
I'm totally cool with it. I don't tend to read with them a lot. I have a few fandom decks myself.
Yeah.
I have a Justice League Tarot that I'm trying to get rid of. I bought them to sell primarily, and then the shop that I had for about 5 minutes closed, and I just never got motivated to resell any of it. So I'm taking that as a loss. I didn't buy.
Well, there is a buy and sell section on the Adventures in Woo Woo Discord if you want to put up your listings there.
Ooh, so. that's a good. You have good ideas. You have good community building.
I have good community. It makes it easy.
It's true. Yeah, the 40 Servants Facebook group is one of the least toxic Facebook groups I've ever been a part of. It's fabulous.
Yeah, it's very I don't know. I don't know. Like, people ask me, how'd you do that? Because I'm not really sure. It just kind of happened. There's no secret. Just fill it with people who are nice and get rid of the people who aren't. That's it.
Well, I think the not to make your ears turn red, but I love the 40 Servants deck because I think so much of it is built on gratitude and understanding that there's a relationship between what you're asking for and how you're getting it. And that's always very much appealed to me about it. Anyway, I do have a few theme decks. The Justice League Tarot was never meant to be mine because I'm a Marvel girl. I'm not a DC girl.
Right. We won't get on.
I enjoy DC, but I'm not as much of a fan.
Yeah.
So
I don't really mind too much. I used to be at DC. I really don't. I'm not gone at superheroes anymore, to be quite honest. But if I have definitely more DC comics than Marvel comics. That's the best way of explaining it.
Like if the thing with the Justice League deck is I think it's really well done, and for people who know the DC lore, they say it's very well done.
All right. Okay.
But for me, it's kind of useless because I don't know any of it.
Right.
I know very little, so it's really
not. Is there a Marvel deck? Is there? I assume there is.
Not an official one.
All right. Okay.
And while I have I wouldn't tell someone not to use or not to purchase an unofficial deck. I also prefer official.
Right. Okay.
So I do have a Vertigo Tarot. That's very heavily based on like the Neil Gaiman Sandman comics.
All right. Okay.
Again, that's a very difficult deck to read with. So I don't read with it very often, but I'm glad I have a copy. I have the Welcome to Night Vale Tarot.
Oh, is it awesome? Is it?
It's pretty cool. Again, extremely difficult to read with.
I can imagine, yeah. Probably purposely.
Yes, partly purposely. I think I also don't read with it very often because I'm pretty sure the deck that I have is a misprint.
It would be hard to know, wouldn't it, with Welcome to Night Vale. Is it a misprint? Is it a joke? Is it something weird?
No, it was actually a misprint, and they corrected it. So I might get another copy of it because I do like supporting them. I actually recently restarted the series because that's what I do when everything is terrifying. I go live in Night Vale for a while.
Yeah, I know the feels.
Yeah, so I do have fandom decks, and I do like them. Again, for me, I enjoy as a Discordian. I think I identify even more with Discordian than Coyote.
Right.
Although again, it's hard with the more postmodern interpretation of Discordian because I want nothing to do with those people.
Sure.
But
well, I suppose just before you go any further, define what Discordian is to you. Then that would because I think it's like chaos magic. We kind of throw it about, and we might all have different slight interpretations, so it could be helpful. Yeah. So I'll stop waffling. What's a Discordian to you?
Well, as a good Discordian, I don't have a good answer for that.
Right.
No. My understanding of Discordianism and my practice of Discordianism is very heavily based on the Principia Discordia.
Okay.
The actual source material that is sort of this irreverent look at a modern day interpretation of the goddess Eris, and what it means to as circling back to what we said earlier, to be joyfully chaotic.
Right. Yeah.
To have some joy in life and not take it or yourself that seriously. Coming back to the rules in Discordianism, there are some rules that are very plainly stated. For example, you should not eat hot dog buns because they were the solace of our goddess in her time of woe. But part of your initiation into becoming a Discordian is to eat a hot dog.
Right.
With a bun.
Yeah.
Specifically to, and it says in the source material, to flaunt or to make note of the fact that this is against, it should be a pork hot dog as well.
Right. Okay.
Because of
break the extra taboos. Just go full.
Break all the taboos.
I was going to say go full hog. Really on that all day.
That was great. That was a perfect moment. So yeah, no, but to break all those taboos and as a reminder not to take yourself seriously. I did not do that because I am a lifelong vegetarian, and I take Discordianism seriously enough to know that I don't think Eris wants me to be miserable.
Right. Yeah, that's fair enough.
So that Discordianism, I'm very much following those approaches that are outlined in the Principia Discordia.
Right.
And that sort of joyful. I've never taken acid, but it's a very clearly acid fueled bit of work. By the way, you can find the Principia Discordia online. We'll make sure to pop a link.
Yeah, sure.
Into the text of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
The entire scanned text for free online, easy to read. That's how I did it. Until friends got me copies of the book itself.
Did you end up then going down Robert Anton Wilson kind of routes, or
I tried so
Illuminatus
hard.
or any of this stuff?
I tried so hard to read Illuminatus, and I personally find it unreadable.
I know no one who has finished it. I know lots of people who have tried. I haven't finished it. I've listened to the audiobook is easier, certainly is, but I still haven't finished it. Yeah. But yeah, I know. I was actually. Have you read the KLF book about the John Higgs? You definitely. Everyone should read that. It's brilliant. But a lot of the KLF stuff is about them taking stuff from Illuminatus. But by the end of it, even the main guy admits that he hasn't finished Illuminatus as well. So I went, fair enough. That's grand.
I just find it there's this very I also haven't finished Catch 22.
Okay.
It's this very specific sort of 60s and 70s literature that I think is such a product of its time.
Yeah.
And I just find super unreadable at this point in my life. Maybe if I tried reading it when I was a teenager, it would have been easier.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I have similar books as well. I think I wish I had read that when I was, at the right age to read it, and it's probably not going to happen. Such is life.
I recently tried to reread Leonard Cohen's Beautiful Losers, which was such an important book to me as a teenager. And I just started rereading it, and I'm like, wow, this is shockingly terrible and racist and awful.
Oh.
And I did a bit of digging.
Is it really that bad? Is it?
It's pretty bad. I did a bit of digging, and he's like, yeah, I was on a lot of cocaine when I wrote that.
Right.
I don't necessarily stand by it these days.
Right. Well, fair enough. He ended up like a Zen Buddhist, didn't he? In the end, kind of.
Yeah. He was a Buju, as we say.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's very much a thing.
We're coming to the end of our time. Would you like to tell people where they can find you, what you're doing? Tell them about the podcast, Patreon, all of the things.
Yay, self-promotion, my least favorite part of any podcast.
Yeah, but do it anyway.
I do it at the end of all of mine. Honestly, the biggest thing that you can do for me is when I'm not doing ER nursing, I am a tarot card reader. And I go by Antifragile Tarot, which is something I picked up in the Chaos Magic groups. So Antifragile Tarot is all about sort of using tarot and assorted other means like the 40 servants to break you down and make you stronger for when you've been broken down. So I focus on very empowering and generally psychological readings. I have a podcast. You can find me as the Antifragile Tarot podcast. I'm on all the things, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you can follow me on Instagram, I'm Antifragile Tarot, one word. Honestly, following me there, liking me, interacting with my stuff, following me on wherever you listen to podcasts, like giving me a follow on Spotify, those would be hugely helpful things for visibility. I do have an Etsy. I am Antifragile Tarot on there. I currently have my Etsy on hiatus, but I hope to lift that by the summer. So stay tuned for that. And I also have my Patreon. I'm Antifragile Tarot on there. I have a Discord that you can access as a Patreon patron. I try to do videos that are patron exclusive. I'll be trying to throw a few more things on there. So the Patreon is really to help keep the podcast running and help pay for transcription to make the podcast more accessible to people with hearing difficulties.
Oh, very cool.
So.
Yeah. So great stuff. Thank you very much for talking to me. I will 100% be asking you back because we literally scraped not even the surface of things in this. So
I know. I'd love to talk about chaos magic.
Well, we didn't even I think we got as far as you were 17 and you said you were never going to do magic again, and then we just went way off on the different tangents, which is fine.
Well, I mentioned going back into picking it back up after my mom died. So
sure, yeah.
We got that. But no, I'd love to talk about a lot of the chaos magic community and stuff. I'd also love to have you on my podcast.
Absolutely, anytime.
Yay!
Right. Okay. So bye bye.